Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm Faith Moore. This is Saving Cinderella, the class. This is session 3, all about the Little Mermaid. And I am here with 4 fabulous students who we will introduce in just a moment. But before we get started, just a quick word to people watching at home. I'm not going to be addressing you anymore until the end. If you're watching at home, I can't hear you, so you can't participate in the class with me or the students in the class, but you can interact with one another by typing into the chat box in the live feed, and you're welcome to do that. And if you are interested in signing up for future sessions, you can click the link which is in the description of this video. There are a bunch more classes coming up. And the last thing I'm going to say is that this class is based on this book written by me, Saving Cinderella, What Feminists Get Wrong About Disney Princesses and How to Set It Right, which you can buy on Amazon, and there's a link to that also in the description. Okay, so we're gonna get started. This is a class all about Ariel and the Little Mermaid. And we're gonna introduce ourselves at this point. So what I would like you guys to say is your name, although I'm gonna give that away by saying your name so that you know who's gonna talk. So tell us your name and tell us something about yourself. It can be like what you do, what your job is or something. And if you don't wanna share that, it can just sort of be like some description of who you are. And what it is, why you decided you wanted to take a class about the Little Mermaid. So I'm gonna just go by your pictures from left to right on my screen. So that's Jenny first.
Hello. My name is Jennifer McDowell. I am the writer at deskofjdogood.com, where I interview authors, artists, entrepreneurs, and I grew up at the Jersey Shore, and so Ariel has always been very close to my heart. You know, it was so huge when I was growing up, and yeah, it's just always been my favorite, and especially since growing up close to the ocean, you know, it was easier to pretend to be her.
Yes, much pretending to be Ariel, I think maybe in everybody's life. Great, thank you. I'm glad you're here. Patty, you're up next.
Hi, my name is Patty. I work part-time as a lecturer but I teach English as a second language to international students at the university I work at. And why Ariel? I think as I grew up during the Disney Renaissance era, and I loved, Ariel, Belle, even Jasmine. I loved them very much. And even when I was a little girl, I loved to like splash my hair back when I went to the swimming pool, just like Ariel. I think I had like dolls of her. I don't collect dolls, but I definitely had a doll of her. And I would say, after I read this chapter and I rewatched the movie recently, and I remember hearing the backlash, the feminist backlash about her, what all the things that she did for a man, basically. And I think she's worth talking about and worth setting things, like setting the wrong things right, basically.
Yeah, thank you. That's amazing. It's funny that you both talked about wanting to be the Little Mermaid, and in the book I describe at the beginning of the chapter how to play mermaids, because I used to play with my friends with the bed sheet and tie the sheet around my waist and then tie it together at the other end, and then you're basically immobilized on the floor with your legs all tied up in a sheet. But we used to play mermaids all the time. Yeah, so thank you. I'm glad you're here. So Rosemary.
Hello, my name is Rosemary Duar. I am a news contributor to the Washington Examiner and Athens Now in Alabama. And so I'm taking this class because I like rediscovering things that were kind of left out when it came to describing the Disney princesses in the current narrative. This is really fun.
Great, yeah, we're so glad you're here, and that's definitely what we're going to talk about. And last but not least, Winter/Princess Winter.
Definitely not least. Yes, I'm Princess Winter Naomi Vera, and yeah, actually what brought me to the Little Mermaid class was you. Like, yes, yes, like prior to that, I was like, I did kind of a story on Beauty and the Beast and stuff, and like, because that's another one of my favorite movies, and my issue was like, Ariel gives her voice up for a man, or like holds herself hostage for a man. But then I realized, no, this is about me. Like, like I actually rewatched it last night and I was like, holy crap, I'm all over in this thing. It was just crazy and stuff.
Yeah, great.
And,
Go ahead.
I'm also like equal parts Ariel, equal parts Belle, equal parts Pinkie Pie, and equal parts DC superhero girls back. So it's like,
that's very specific. I wish we all knew exactly what our DNA was comprised of, Disney wise. But yeah, thank you. I'm so glad you're here.
And I'm an equal part Sailor Moon too. So.
And Sailor Moon. Okay, excellent. Wow. I definitely feel that I must watch Sailor Moon because everybody loves it so much, and I confess I have never watched it. But I'm so glad that you guys are all here, and that's so kind of you to say that that I said something that meant something to you, and I hope that we do that now too. So what I want to do is just first give a little bit of background about the movie. I think you guys probably know this already, but I'm just going to sort of lay all this out, and then we can kind of get into what some of the misconceptions are about it. So as you guys kind of mentioned, The Little Mermaid came out in 1989 and was the start of the Disney Renaissance. Before that, I get a lot of flack for this because I know a lot of people love some of the movies that came out before 1989, but it is known as Disney's Dark Ages because the kind of glory days of Snow White and Cinderella and Sleeping Beauty were over, and there had been literally 30 years in between princess movies. So Sleeping Beauty came out in 1959, and then not a single princess movie until 1989 when The Little Mermaid came out, and it started the Disney Renaissance. And after that came, Beauty and the Beast and Lion King and Aladdin and all of these movies that are kind of like the glorious resurrection of Disney, right? The movie is based sort of like very, very loosely on a fairy tale written by Hans Christian Andersen. He wrote it in 1836, but unlike some of the earlier princesses and the earlier movies that we were kind of talking about in some of the other classes, it really is a different story. If you've read the original fairy tale, you'll know that first of all, it does not have a happy ending, spoiler alert, and it's kind of it has similar themes, but actually it's kind of getting at a sort of different idea than the movie is. And so today in the class, we're going to talk mostly about the movie, but if you love the fairy tale and you want to bring that up as we're talking, that's totally fine. But I just want to be clear that I'm going to stick to the movie mostly during this class. So when the film came out, it was received as a sort of feminist triumph. Ariel was seen as, she was often called feisty, independent. She was kind of like this, she was kind of the reimagined Disney princess, like for a feminist era, and people were really into that, and film critics were really excited about it, and viewers were excited about it, etc. Since then, so since 1989, and from then until now, there's been like a huge feminist backlash about the movie. And now it's kind of, as you guys were sort of alluding to, it's now seen as a story about a girl who gives up her voice to get with a guy, and that she has never met, essentially, that she saw one time on a boat, and that is basically where we are now with the movie in terms of like culturally. So the first thing I want to do, and I want to get you guys to do, is I'm going to get a blank paper here. I would like to make a list of the sort of complaints that either you have yourself or that you have heard about this movie. Like, what are the things that you've heard are so wrong with this film? So why don't we try raising your hand, and then you can unmute yourself. But we just lost Patty, but hopefully she'll be back. Okay, so if you can tell me one thing that you've heard or that you feel about this film that is negative, raise your hand. Rosemary.
Let's see. It says she's materialistic and submissive.
Okay, so I'm gonna just write these and then, okay, sorry about my handwriting, I'm like backwards here. And sorry, the second one was submissive? So
yes.
Yeah, okay. All right, cool. What else? I can't, if your hand is up, you have to put it up in front of your face because otherwise I can't see you. All right. Jenny, is your hand up? Yeah, go ahead, but unmute yourself first.
I honestly, I don't know any because I guess I just never wanted to read anything about that. So I have no answers. That's why I'm not raising my hand
Oh, okay,
for that.
sorry.
Yeah, so sorry.
Yeah, so Winter, you were saying that you initially had some complaints about it, but now you disagree. But like, what can you tell us the things that you thought originally?
Yeah, I was like, holy crap, she just held herself, or she just let herself be held for ransom for a guy she barely met.
Mm-hmm. Right. So held for ransom, you're saying like because she basically says like if I don't get to kiss him, then I belong to Ursula.
Ariel or Ursula basically set her up to fail.
Totally.
That when she did, she could hold Ariel for ransom.
Right.
For the crown.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it's definitely like a bad deal that Ursula is making, and yeah. So right, so I'm putting she's held for ransom, and also that you also mentioned like they haven't met before. Yeah, Patty is coming in and out. I'm sorry, Patty, that you're missing, but we'll hopefully get you back. Okay, anything else before we move on from that? Okay. Yep. Yes.
Yeah, I think I did say that like they barely know each other and stuff like that. So
yeah, like they haven't met or they just saw each other once on a boat, right? Yeah.
Another one that's really funny is like there are some that talk about like how when they're really young they identify with Ariel, but as they grow older they identify with Triton and stuff. She's like defined.
Yeah, right. So that she's exactly. This is a big
one.
Right, that she's defiant and that she's a child and she should obey her father, right? Hey, Patty, can we hear you? No? Okay, sorry. Okay, so this is a great list. This is excellent. I have kind of made my own list that these are all sort of incorporated into, but these are the things I want to make sure we talk about today. Ooh, if I can turn the page. All right, there we go. All right, so here are, if you can see these. All right, so here are the questions and the sort of ideas that I want to talk about. And this is kind of, you guys all raised these. So the first one is it all just for a guy, right? Does this whole thing that happens with, giving up her voice and getting legs and all this stuff, is it just because she fell for some guy that she saw on a boat? They don't even know each other. That's what Winter was just talking about, right? So is it true that they don't, like she goes through all of this stuff and kind of like sells her father to Ursula for some guy that she saw and she thought he was handsome. This one, I guess we kind of didn't necessarily touch on this, but like a lot of the feminist criticism around the movie comes from the idea that she gives up her voice. And so since she gives up her voice and she spends a large chunk of the movie without talking, and that's the chunk of the movie where she's kind of getting to know Eric and she's trying to get him to kiss her, there's this sort of critique that it means that the movie is sort of glorifying physical attraction over some sort of emotional connection. So there's that piece. And then there's this last piece that Winter was just alluding to, which is that there's a lot of people, in fact, people on who not feminists, people on the left and the right, who are really upset because it seems like the movie kind of glorifies childhood disobedience, right? Because the father Triton says like, no, you can't go to the surface, you can't be a human being, and she defies him and she makes this terrible deal with the witch. So those are kind of the points that I want to address, and we're going to do it one by one, and I'm going to want to hear from you too. So the goal here, and again, you can disagree and people watching can disagree, but the goal here is to prove that The Little Mermaid is actually about brains over looks, fighting for what you believe in, and being independent, and none of these other things. So we'll see how we feel about that at the end. So let's talk about it's all for a man. What do you guys think? Do you agree with that? Does anyone want to comment on that? Rosemary?
It's not just about a man. It's about her wanting to be a wife, wanting her to be a mother, and even separating from her family and being her own person. That's really what that's about.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Yeah, Jennifer.
Also, I think, you know, it's evident as I was rewatching the movie how long I was trying to think like how long it took her to make that collection, probably since she was very little. So her interest in sort of, um, you know, setting out and exploring, you know, this place has been there for quite some time. And I think um, it's not like all of a sudden she just got interested in the the other world. I can't think of it above
The surface, yeah, human world, yeah.
Because you know she saw him. I mean, it goes way back, and I think too it's interesting. Well, that's another thing to
Yeah, no, but I think both of the things that you're talking about are true, and I think the thing that I would really point out is kind of, I mean, what you were just alluding to, Jenny, is like the movie, when the movie begins, Eric, we have met Eric. We meet Eric in the very first scene, but Ariel has not met Eric. And she spends the first, I don't know, 20, 30 minutes of the movie, having never met Eric, sort of describing how important to her the human world is. You know, she has that, like you just said, she has this huge collection of human things. She's in the shipwreck going after, you know, dinglehoppers and snarflets, you know, and even going back for her treasures, even though like a shark is after her. This is really important to her. She misses an important event, you know, with her dad because of this, and she sings the song Part of That World, which is like so famous and such a big part of the movie, before she ever lays eyes on Eric. So one important thing to note is that if this is all for a man, I mean, she clearly wanted to be a human being before any of that happened. So I think that's one misconception that's important to kind of put to rest, is like, obviously she then meets Eric and she wants to be with him. And I think what Rosemary was saying is true. I mean, she sees that there's a possibility for love and she goes for it. And that is the sort of motivator for her to make the deal with the sea witch. But initially, you know, it's just about wanting to be a human being, or being really interested in human culture, you know, if you want to put it that way. So I'm wondering if it's not only about the guy, right? If the movie is kind of advancing this plotline, this story about someone who discovers that she is sort of obsessed with being something that her family doesn't approve of. I'm wondering what you think the filmmakers were going for there. What is the universal kind of piece there that they're trying to get at? And you can raise your hand right in front of your face if you want to answer that question. Or not. I can answer it.
Yeah.
What, go ahead.
Yeah. I don't know if I mean, I can't speak from the writer's perspective because like I haven't really read the audio commentary and stuff, but like from my perspective, it seems like it could also, I mean, there's a possibility that there's kind of finding yourself to it and stuff, but like from my perspective, I kind of saw it as literal. Like she is someone that she wants to be someone that like it's near impossible to be, or at least she's been led to believe that not only is it near impossible to be, but that it's morally wrong to be and stuff. And it's like that's kind of how it like went. That's kind of my experience with it. Because that's kind of what happened with me and stuff.
Sure. So sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, because like this is who I really am, but like initially I was led to believe that like who I was wrong, and I didn't feel that. I didn't feel that like it was wrong to be me and stuff, because I mean like even when I was told it wasn't me, I just there was something in me that was like, no, this is the real me. And it's like, and so from that perspective, it made a lot of sense. And on Jennifer's point, I had my own collection, like of girl stuff and everything like that. And I had a number of collections, and like I too was devastated when they were destroyed.
Yeah, so I think what you're saying is like there is a sort of universal idea of like sometimes whatever it is, right? Like we are not able to, we're born into a family, for example, like Ariel is born into a family that doesn't accept her dream, right? And so she has a choice to make. She can decide to sort of be what her family wants her to be, or she can decide to follow her dreams, right? And so I think, when I ask like, what is the sort of universal truth here? I think, it's not so much like one specific thing, but I think it is kind of relatable for some people to think about what happens if, whatever it is, like maybe you want to be a musician and your family is like, no, we're a family of lawyers and doctors, or whatever,
That's the plot of Coco.
Right, exactly. Like you want to travel the world, but you're supposed to stay home and care for your, I don't know who, but so I think there is that initial piece that I think that this critique about It's Just for a Guy kind of misses, that she's somebody who finds herself in a place of being told no when she's got a dream, right? So she has a dream, like Rapunzel has a dream, right? She's got a dream. Wait, Patty, are you talking? Because you're muted. Can you unmute yourself?
You can continue. It's okay.
Oh, okay. Or sorry. Okay. So we start off with that, right? She already wants to be human, and then she is. Then she kind of meets Eric, and she says that she's in love with him before she's ever actually talked to him. She sees him on the boat, and then she rescues him, and she sings at him, and then she's, and then she says she loves him. So again, so now we've got the man. What do you guys have thoughts about that? Like, I know I write about it in the book and I can tell you what I think, but is that kind of a thing worth making a deal with the Sea Witch for? You see a guy on a boat and then you rescue him from drowning. Rosemary?
Eric is also an ideal man. It's not like he's some swab guy on a ship.
Uh-huh.
So it's like if she picks the best, which is a good way to always look at that. And it's like she's already seen him as brave in saving him from a ship. And yeah, it's like she thinks that she has found someone valiant and someone probably has a brave spirit as she thinks she does, and that's attractive to her.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree with that. I think that in real life, we don't always get to kind of have like a little performance about exactly who the person is that we just sort of saw across the room and thought was attractive. But in this story, Ariel actually does, right? So she sees him and she's attracted to him physically, but then like right after that, he basically kind of goes into a little song and dance about who he is that she watches, which is that there's a huge storm and the boat is kind of foundering, and he saves a dog. He helps to steer the ship. He's a prince, but he's okay with like getting in there and getting dirty and saving the day. And the boat explodes with him on it. And I think by the end, she's got a fairly good idea of who this guy is. And then he has never seen her before, but decides that she's the one he's going to marry. But and this is kind of the next part that I want to kind of move on to, is he he hears her singing. And that's kind of all he's got. He wakes up and there's this girl singing in his face, and she jumps in the water and she's gone, right? So that is one of the key metaphors of the movie, right? Her voice. And it's one of the key misconceptions. So I want to talk about that for just a second, and then I'm going to get your take too. But there's this confusion about what's important in this story, voices or looks. And the feminist critique is that it's just looks, because she ends up having no voice. And so what's Eric even doing? I mean, he's got this mute, and then he's, falling in love with her. But the first important thing to notice is that the person in this movie who's obsessed with looks is Ursula. The sea witch, the bad guy, right? And if the bad guy says it, it's probably a safe bet that the filmmakers are not advocating for this thing, right? So when we meet Ursula, she's doing her hair, she's putting on a bunch of lipstick. She is very obsessed with her cleavage, and when she talks about how she's helped people, which is obviously a lie, but like when she's giving examples of how helpful she is, it's just to save people's looks, right? So like the fat person becomes skinny and the ugly girl becomes pretty, and it's kind of like she thinks that the way to be happy is to look a certain way. She's like obsessed with looks, and of course she tells Ariel to use body language, and that men don't like a lot of chatter and that kind of thing, right? Exactly, right. So she's the one that's obsessed with looks, and so that should tell us something. That's the first thing. So that probably means that Ariel's voice is actually really, really important, right? Like it's not just something that can be taken away, it's something that matters, because the bad guy is saying like, no, looks, it's all about looks, right? Like this is a movie all about looks. And then she takes away her voice. Okay, so do you guys have thoughts like what the voice is doing, like what it represents in the story? Because I think that it's not just a voice, it's a metaphor for something. But I always think things are metaphors for other things. So Patty, go ahead.
Okay. I had some technical issues, but now we're okay.
Oh, sorry. I'm glad you're back.
Oh yeah, so I'm back. I was thinking about like in your book when you talked about like Sleeping Beauty, and she's giving all these gifts, and she's given the gift of a beautiful song, and how a beautiful voice or the gift of song is kind of represents a beautiful soul. So in this case, even though the Little Mermaid is more modern, we see her being kind of a sassy teenager, but her voice is what makes her really special. She's the prize of Sebastian's orchestra like performance, and
oh, you're frozen. Okay, but yes, so you're frozen. Hopefully you'll come back. But right, yeah. So her voice is kind of, and that's a really good connection. So yeah, Sleeping Beauty is
basically, yeah.
Okay, good. Keep going.
Yeah, and I guess one thing I would say, like, no, actually, I'll save it for later. But yeah, that's it. Okay, for now.
Yeah. So right, so her voice is really important. Not just as like her beautiful singing voice, but it's something that for example, for Sleeping Beauty, like you just said, it's a gift that she is given for a reason. Winter, I think your hand is up. It's hard to tell. Yes. Oh, but you're still muted, so you have to unmute yourself.
There we go.
Okay.
Yeah. Watching the movie recently, or like watching the movie last night, I realized I noticed what she was doing with her voice, like what she was saying with her voice, and she never really wastes a word with her voice. Like when she talks about, I mean, like when she's like when her dad's calling humans barbarians, and when another thing that really stands out is when she says he could have died, and he says one less human to worry about, and she's like, you don't even know him, and stuff like that. And it's like, especially in the 90s, the voice, I mean, like the voice is really, I mean, like, especially to feminists, real feminists, not the extremists that like they say like men or that are all against men and stuff, but those that realize that we need to be along, that we need to be on an equal, like, but yeah, it's really important to feminists in that perspective, because it's like that's how we express our desire to be treated as friends and stuff, as opposed to be treated as less than. And that's something that like Ursula kind of points out, is that there is this less than and stuff, and and she thinks the only way to get ahead is through looks.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I think what you're saying about sort of feminism in terms of like the initial idea of like women should also have a voice is really relevant here, because I think this is a movie that feminists should get behind in a lot of ways, but they completely misunderstand it and misread it. So then it's all about like a voice for a man. But yeah, so I think the things that you guys are talking about are so valid, and that for me, when I think about voice, I mean, think about the ways that we talk about voice just sort of in colloquial speech. Like, for example, let your voice be heard, speak up, that kind of thing, right? What we're saying is your voice is the you of you, right? It's like your essence, who you are on the inside. And that should ring true, because all of these princess stories are about that. They're about women figuring out who they are on the inside, or at least sort of allowing the world to see who they are on the inside. And so I think there's voice. Yeah, Jennifer, go ahead.
I just wanted to say too, she took her voice, but if she hadn't intervened on the third day, she wouldn't have needed it, because she was able to get him to fall in love with her just by being who she was. Mm-hmm. There's that moment where, his, guardian says, you have someone right here, and he's feeling all the things he's feeling for her. But he has that one fact, like, the one person I responded to had a voice, so this can't be her because she doesn't have a voice. But I thought that was really interesting too, the whole idea of even without a voice, she was still there, she was still herself, and she was still able to, charm him in the way that, you find love.
Yeah, well, I think it's a really interesting interplay, because while he's definitely attracted to her, and she definitely has the ability to kind of display her personality without her voice. She does a lot of things, just the way that he displays who he is to her on the boat. She does a lot of things that displays who she is to him, like as they're going through the town square and in the carriage and everything, they kind of have that interaction together. But I think the really important piece, though, is that he actually doesn't recognize her again until she gets her voice back. So he doesn't recognize her. I mean, he saw her face, but he doesn't know it's her until her voice is returned to her. So I think the central metaphor here is that her voice is a stand-in for her inner self. So she has the ability to kind of display her personality non-verbally. And that is attractive to Eric, because Eric is in love with her. Because in the fairy tale kind of symbolism of love at first sight, and in the fairy tale trope of voice, he has seen into her inner self and fallen in love with her, right? So he's actually in love with her, but he doesn't recognize her because she doesn't have her voice. And so he's attracted to her because she is still herself. Even without her voice, she's her. So she acts like her, but she doesn't speak like her. And that, that's important.
Yeah.
And I think too, it's important to note that when Ursula feels like Ariel's getting too close to being successful, like Jennifer, like you were just talking about, she almost does it. I mean, she they're about to kiss in the boat, and then the eels knock the boat over, right? And he Eric throws away his flute, which is where he was playing the song that she was singing, and sort of decides that he's gonna stay with her, that the other girl was made up. And even, I mean, nobody in the movie except Ursula talks about Ariel's looks. Like Grimsby is the servant that sort of tells him marry Ariel, and he says you have someone warm and caring right here. He doesn't say like you've got like a beautiful hot girl, she's right there and you should just get with her because she's so hot, and doesn't talk, and isn't it great? She'll just be silent and it'll be fantastic. So that's not what's going on at all. But Ursula, in order to sort of stop this whole thing from happening, she uses Ariel's voice to place a spell on Eric, because that's the only thing that she can do. It's the only thing she can use. It's the only thing that he would be attracted to other than Ariel's self, right? Other than like the physical Ariel that's right there. The only other thing that trumps that is her voice. So she uses her voice to hypnotize him. And then the last thing that I would say about her voice is, if you were Ursula and you were trying to get Ariel to fail, right? You're going to give her this deal, but you want her to fail because you essentially want to imprison her. Wouldn't you take the thing that you think is going to make it most difficult for her to succeed with? Right? So she could have taken her looks. She could have said, you can go and you can talk, but you're going to be really ugly. Right? Like she could have said that. But she doesn't. She takes her voice because it's with her voice that she would have been most easily able to break the spell. Right? So I think we're clear about voice. Does anyone have any questions about voice as a metaphor in the movie? Okay. So, oh yeah, Winter. Sorry. Did you want to say something?
Yeah. Another thing I wanted to point out was like the fact that like Ursula uses her voice to try and like hold sway over Eric, and she also uses her magic to hypnotize Eric and stuff like that. But like the thing is, her voice only goes so far. Like one of the things I really like, and like one of the things that I don't think gets enough credit is Sherry Stoner, the voice of Slappy the Squirrel in Animaniacs. She's also the person. She's also Ariel. Like she was the animation inspiration for Ariel and stuff like that. And like doesn't give enough credit. Like I don't think she gets enough credit, but like there's so much that you can express in your personality without using your voice and stuff. So much you can, like so much that so much you show in terms of your character and stuff like that without your voice. And you can have one or the other, but no one can really connect with you until you have both. And that's why Ursula can't win over Ariel, because she has her voice, but she kicks poor Max in the wedding scene and stuff. And it's like, right. That's not something Ariel would do.
Right, exactly. So it's not so much like you need to look a certain way and have a voice, but you need to act a certain way and have a voice, I think, and I think it's sort of like, right, like Ursula has Ariel's voice, and she's used that to magically hypnotize Eric, but she's not, I mean, if he wasn't hypnotized, he wouldn't fall in love with her even with the voice, because she kicks dogs and stuff. But I think that's kind of the point. It's that the voice is so important that it does hypnotize him, and he can't see past it. So we're supposed to kind of feel like the most important thing is who you are on the inside. And even if you look a certain way on the outside that maybe isn't as appealing or isn't the right way to look, or however, like your inner self is what's most important. And that's what's most important for every Disney princess from that moment back in time, right? So that idea of your inner self being more important than your outer self is a sort of fairy tale trope. And it's one that feminist critics or critics in general get wrong all the time, because if you look at it literally, like for example, if you look at, Cinderella literally, it seems like it's about becoming more beautiful, right? Like being sort of in ugly clothes and having beautiful clothes. Or, and here it looks like it's about like, oh, just take away your voice. It doesn't matter. You can get the guy with your body language. And that is obviously, it's actually the opposite of that, right? The idea is you really can't connect with someone if the you of you is removed, and you're just sort of left with this shell that can kind of act like you, but can't really connect on the same sort of deep inner level that fairy tale princes and princesses are supposed to connect on. So I think, so we've got that. And I guess my last sort of question about that is, since feminist critics are so obsessed with the literal, I guess I'm wondering if we can sort of tease out what that actually looks like in real life. Because my sort of thing is that all of these things could happen in real life, but not the way they happen in the fairy tale or in the Disney movie, but they are sort of universal. So do you guys have any ideas, like a sentence about like the Little Mermaid's Guide to Love? Like what is it saying? Patty?
Well, I'll say one thing. I guess I probably can't make this into a sentence, but I'll try, or a few.
That's okay.
I was thinking if feminists didn't even watch the movie, I don't know, but because one thing that rewatching it, she has no voice, but like you said, her personality, we can see her personality through her actions. Like I think about when kind of Eric gave Ariel the reins to steer to rise to lead the carriage, and she goes over the cliff, and he's like, whoa, really scared, but she's like loving it, and then he kind of like, hey, this is okay, she's kind of fun. So I would say thanks. I would say that in real life, I would kind of say that about myself. Like, I mean, most of us are not models, and I feel like our significant others weren't attracted to us because of how, because we weren't like the epitome of beauty. Maybe they liked, they like certain qualities, like, oh, she has a good personality, she has, she's fun, all these things. So yeah, okay, so I would say it totally works in the real world. Maybe, okay, I'll try and summarize. So the Little Mermaid's Guide to, to love or to life, or I would say is, be yourself, be yourself completely. Mm-hmm. And, that the person who loves you, he'll see you for who you are. Yeah. Bam.
Does anyone want to, totally agree. Does anyone want to add to that? Going once, going twice? No. Oh yeah, Rosemary, go ahead.
I would probably say that if you are going to pick a man, it's like, make sure he's valuable enough to risk your most valuable asset, but don't give that up for him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, go ahead. I totally agree with you. And yes, Winter, go ahead.
Yeah. I think it's important. One thing I think what really stands out is that, like, it was a bad idea to make a deal with the devil in the first place, but at the same time, like, she did it not for the love of the prince, but for the love of herself, for the love of her true self. And like the only way she could be with Eric was by loving her true self. And like, I also, one of the things I really love about the movie is like how she doesn't kiss him before the sun sets and stuff. Right. And he sees her for who she really is. And like, Grimsby's like, what are you doing? And he says, I already lost her once. I'm not going to lose her again. And it's like, and it's like, that's the thing. He doesn't care about the fact that she's a mermaid. and he doesn't care about the fact that we're like, and like, yeah, he sees her true self and he loves her for her true self and stuff. And like, she loves him the same way.
Yeah, I mean, he has to know who she is. I mean, that's the thing. She's a mermaid. I mean, she is a mermaid. He has to know that about her before, you know, like I think like if it had worked, right, and if like, you know, she'd done the kissing and everything would have happened, like I think that like she would have eventually had to explain that like previously she had been a mermaid and now she is a human being, and that she, you know, comes from the ocean and her dad's like the king, right? So I think, you know, I think so we're sort of talking about like what is the Little Mermaid's guide to love, and I think, you know, what you guys are sort of saying, and I agree, is that, you know, the things that are most important to us about our significant other are not what they look like on the outside, although that may be why we were initially drawn to them, just like Ariel is initially drawn to Eric because he's so handsome, right? Like we might sort of see somebody across the room and be like, wow, I want to know more about that person because of their physical appearance. But if we meet them and then they're a total jerk, they're not attractive to us anymore. And I think that, you know, that idea of, you know, the thing that's going to be, like, if you're looking for love, the thing that's going to be most important to that person is who you are on the inside. And that's what's going to matter most to them, not the way that you look on the outside. And you have to be, and like you were saying, you have to be sort of honest about who you are on the inside, and, you know, who yourself is, in order to move forward with whatever it is that you want to be. So I think there's all of that. Now, there's one last thing that we have to talk about, and Winter, you sort of alluded to it at the very beginning of what you said, which is that it wasn't a good idea to make a deal with the Sea Witch. And so one of the criticism that we talked, I sort of alluded to this at the beginning, one of the criticism across the board, not just from feminists, is that Ariel is a spoiled brat, and that she, you know, she's a child, her father says no, and then she sort of goes off and does it anyway, and it wasn't a good deal. You know, it wasn't super helpful. And in fact, I mean, she didn't know this, but maybe she could have guessed, right? Ursula isn't even really after Ariel. She's after Triton, and she's after the crown. And when it doesn't work out and Ursula becomes her slave, she sort of entraps Triton to switch with her so that then he's the prisoner and she's free. So I think, you know, one of the criticisms is this is a movie that promotes disobedience, like childhood disobedience. It promotes kind of saying, you know, kids standing up to their parents and saying, you know, your rules are wrong, I'm going to go do my own thing. Do you guys see it that way? I can tell you what I think in a minute, but do you guys see it that way? You can raise your hand if you, yeah, Jennifer.
Yeah, I was watching very closely when I recently rewatched it, and the thing that really struck me was how he didn't listen to what she had to say, and he admonished her. He spoke to her like she was a little kid and not someone who's becoming an adult. And I noticed that for the first time, and you can kind of see that he thinks that he might have gone too far in a couple different scenes. And then when she's missing, he says, "What have I done?" Because he didn't engage with her on an intellectual reason, even for why, you know, humans are dangerous. He could have taken her aside and said, like, listen, this is why. And so I think what I like about the story is that, and I think why girls like the story especially and relate to her, is we all have those moments with our parents, you know, where they're not listening, and you slam your door, or you're, you know, when you're growing up, because they're transitioning from, you know, treating you as a kid who they don't want you to, like, you know, walk off the plank somewhere and, you know, talk to you in a more adult way. And so I remember thinking that, like, you can understand why she shouldn't have done that, but how it got to that point was kind of she wasn't really given her due as far as, you know, talking and all that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so right. So one issue is like maybe Triton was wrong, and maybe he was being too harsh. And I think that the sort of, to say that devil's advocate thing that I don't actually think, I think that the response to that would be, yeah, but he's the dad and she's the child, right? Like, Patty, go ahead.
I guess one thing, like what Jennifer was saying, you know, the way Triton was talking with his daughter. Again, she even says so herself, like, I'm 16, I'm not a child. I'm a mom of a toddler, so it's a little bit different. But like, when my son grows up, the way I'm going to talk to him as a child, and then as a teenager, and then as a young adult, it's going to be different. I hope it's going to be different. But I think like what Jennifer was saying, you know, the dad doesn't really hear her out, and I see this. I mean, in a lot of these like coming of age movies, that's a lot of the conflict is, you know, the parents have it this way, the kids have it this way, and they're not really hearing each other. I guess it's like Brave is kind of like that, but I haven't seen Brave in like forever. But like Moana is very similar. You know, the dad just doesn't want to hear Moana out, and so she rebels in that way. So, but also I would say that, you know, Ariel, Moana, Merida, I guess they're not children. You know, they're on the verge of becoming adults. So it's you know, and there has to be a way for them to break away.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's kind of the key point, what you just said, is that they're not actually children. And I think it's not like the movie is saying, oh, at 16, you're not a child. Because in our culture, obviously a 16-year-old is still somewhat a child. They're a dependent, and, you know, they would need to follow, like if they're going to live in, like if I had a 16-year-old and they were living in my home, then I would expect them to follow certain rules that I set forth. But then if, you know, when they became an adult and they left my home, then, you know, they're on their own, basically, right? So it's not that 16 is a magical number. It's just that the idea is in all of these stories, you know, because Moana gets the same criticism. You know, people who don't like The Little Mermaid often have the same problem with Moana, or you know, there's a couple of other ones. There's ones that aren't princess ones, like How to Train Your Dragon, I think, is one where the guy doesn't, I don't know, I've never seen that. Anyway, but the point is that these are stories in which the character has become an adult. So it doesn't really matter what the age is. The character has become an adult, and the parent is not okay with that. I mean, think about like think about like Snow White, right? The Snow White has become an adult, and the queen is not okay with that, right? Here is a story where Ariel has become an adult, and she is saying, I have been obsessed with human stuff for forever. I want to go to the surface. You know, initially it's not clear whether she wanted to be a human, but I think she does, because she says, you know, she wants to have legs, and, you know, in part of that world, she talks about having legs and walking,
Dancing or something.
Dancing, exactly, right. So I think she does, and so what she's saying is, you know, I have followed your rules all of this time because I've been your child, and now I'm a grown-up, and I don't want to follow your rules anymore, and I'm sorry, but this is what I have to do. And for her, the only way to do it, since what she wants is something that has to happen magically, right? Like she can't become a human being, like unless there's magic, right? And her father has magic, but her father won't use it for her. So there's only one way, and the way is to go to the Sea Witch, and the Sea Witch only offers one deal, and the deal is bad. So then the question becomes, and this is a question, and, you know, I don't think we're going to answer it here. The question becomes, if you have a dream and the dream feels so important to you that if you don't follow it, you'll be miserable and sad forever, right? Like Sebastian says, like, oh, if you don't do this, you'll be miserable for the rest of your life, right? Is it worth making a bad deal to do it? Like, is it worth doing whatever it takes or not? You know, and I think that's what we all have to figure out. Is our dream worth that? Winter, is your hand up? Sorry, I can't tell. Yes. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, like I was saying prior to the class, when you especially being transgender and stuff like that, like when you talk to somebody that doesn't know what that's like, that has no clue what that's like, you do sound like a spoiled brat to them. And you kind of are, you kind of maybe a spoiled brat, even though I was like, for so long, like my parents, like again, watching the show or watching the movie last night, I was like, that scene, like initially I thought Under the Sea was like this really fun little number and stuff, but really watching it this last time, I was like, oh no, that's not what Sebastian should be talking about, because like she doesn't, she loves her friends, there are perks to being a mermaid, but at the same time, like that's not who she is and stuff. And it's like,
yeah, you're right. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
And like my parents would do the same. They'd like, well, you need to wear more, you need to dress like in better suits and stuff like that. And it's like, I hate being in suits. They're really confining and stuff. And like I'd spend a large portion of my life like for a long time they were able to convince me that like I was morally wrong for doing what I was doing and stuff. But at the same time, like suppressing myself and stuff for so long, it made me feel miserable, like really miserable. And like going to that point, like seeing her with the legs and just how happy she is, even though she doesn't have a voice. And then Sebastian's like, I'm gonna march right down to your father and tell him. I was like right with her, just no, you have no clue what that's like. What going down there and like just being yourself for a few minutes and then going back to what you used or where you were, especially when there's not a possibility that you can return to being your true self.
Sure. Yeah. So there it is, right? There's that thing we were just talking about, right? Is it worth it, right? Is it worth it to make this choice that might totally separate you from, your family or your group of people or whatever, right? And I think, that's the question that we can't really answer for everyone in the world, right? And each person has to make that decision. We're almost out of time, but Rosemary, I saw your hand up, so you can be the last person. Go ahead, and then we'll sign off.
And it's one of the things I kind of wanted to bring up metaphorically. It's like Trident is integral in her being a happy human. And he does truly love her. Yes. And he does want to see her happy. So he's like, he talks to Sebastian and says, she really does love him, doesn't she? And wants to make her happy and wants to see her heart fulfilled. And it did take her making that huge risk and even putting the entire sea at risk, her whole family at risk to make it happen. But at the same time, Trident did want to see her fulfilled as a woman. And he did make that happen for her.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's really important to note that she doesn't actually become a human being via the deal that she makes with Ursula. She becomes a human being via her father, like understanding. But he wouldn't, like you just said, he wouldn't have been willing to make her human if she hadn't have done that. Like she did this huge, crazy thing that was a bad choice. She made a bad choice, but it was all she could do. And in doing that, he saw like, oh, she's never going to be happy unless she has this thing. And, whatever it is for whoever you are, right? Like for us, just watching the movie, it could be anything, right? It could be like wanting to climb Mount Everest. Like, it could really be anything at all. The idea is she wanted it so badly that when she couldn't convince her father, she had to break away from her father. She had to break away. And so she has to, but it convinces him, and like Jennifer was saying at the beginning, he already sees like, maybe I'm being too harsh. Like, I don't know, I want to support her, but I think that humans are dangerous. So I don't really know what to do. Anyway, we are out of time, so I'm going to stop there. But I think if you take anything away from this class, I hope it is that this is not a movie about looks. It's not a movie about, just giving up your voice for a man. It's a movie about really knowing inside who you are and how important it is to be your true self. And I think that's that's what the movie's about. And so I hope that people will rewatch the movie, because I think when you watch the movie, you can kind of see these things. And if you don't see them, that's okay too, you know. And if you don't buy it, you don't buy it. And I know there's lots of people out there that don't buy it, but you have to at least have some kind of argument against it. And I hope that now you guys are armed with your arguments in favor. And so I wanted to say thank you guys for being here. It was a pleasure to have you in the class. And I will now just plug the next class, which is all about Beauty and the Beast. I know some of you are already signed up, which is great. It's on the 24th, March 24th, which is next Sunday at 4 p.m. Eastern. And there are still, I think, maybe 1 or 2 spots available. So if you are watching and you'd like to sign up, just click the link in the description of this video, and we would love to have you. So that's it for now. And thanks for being here. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.